Armin had always liked quiet places. He worked as a young engineer in a space research company. But even though his job was connected to science and technology, his heart always found peace in nature. Whenever he felt stressed, he would drive to the mountains outside the city, where the air was fresh and the world felt calm. On one particular evening, when the sky looked strange and dark clouds gathered in unusual shapes, Armin drove up the narrow road as he always did, not knowing that his life was about to change forever that day. The sky was filled with sudden flashes of light. It was not lightning, at least not the kind he had ever seen before. The colors were brighter, almost like colorful streams moving across the sky. Birds flew away in confusion. The wind blew in unpredictable directions. Armin stopped the car on the side of the hill and got out, staring at the sky with a mixture of fear and amazement. His heart beat a little faster. He had worked with scientists long enough to know when something unusual was happening. But even then, he was not ready for what happened next. A sound like a distant hum filled the air. It was soft at first, but then it grew louder, almost like a machine trying to steady itself. Armin turned toward the valley below and noticed something bright falling from the sky. It wasn't a meteor. It wasn't a plane. It was something completely different shaped, like a small pod, glowing faintly and moving toward the ground with an unsteady motion. Armin felt his stomach tighten. He was afraid but also curious. Without thinking too much, grabbed his flashlight and started walking toward the area, where he thought it would land. The ground shook slightly when the object touched down. Not like an explosion, but like something heavy settling into the earth. Armin slowed down as he approached the clearing. His feet moved carefully over the rocks and plants. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept going. The glowing object was right there in front of him. It was about the size of a small car, made of a smooth silver material, with strange shapes carved into it. It didn't look like anything humans had built. For a few seconds, Armin stood still and just watched. His breath turned shallow. His heart beat louder than the wind. He wondered if he should go back, call someone, or simply leave this place. But something inside him told him to look closer. His curiosity won. He took a few steps forward. The pod made a soft sound, like air releasing. A thin line appeared across its surface, and slowly, the top part opened. A gentle, cool mist spread into the air. Armin covered his mouth and nose for a moment, unsure if it was safe. But after a few breaths, he realized it didn't smell strange. It didn't hurt his eyes. It was just cold inside the pod. He saw something that made him freeze. There was a girl. She looked young maybe, around his age, but unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin had a faint glow. Her hair was long and smooth, shining like soft metal in the moonlight. Her eyes were closed and she seemed weak, almost as if she had fainted. Her clothes were made of thin, light material that looked like it was woven from light itself. Armin felt fear rise in his chest. But something else rose with it concern. She didn't look dangerous. She looked hurt, exhausted, and alone. His heart softened. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, as if trying not to disturb a sleeping bird. He reached out and gently touched her wrist. Her skin felt cool, softer than anything he had ever touched. She moved slightly, taking a shallow breath. Armin felt a wave of worry wash over him. She needed help. He didn't know who she was or where she came from. But he knew one thing: leaving her here was not an option. He whispered softly, even though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Hey, can you hear me? Are you okay?" She didn't respond. Her chest rose and fell slowly, showing that she was alive but weak. Armin looked around the clearing. The pod had created a shallow dent in the ground, but everything else seemed peaceful. No one else was there. No sign of danger. No sign that someone would come looking for her anytime soon. He felt a responsibility heavy on his shoulders. He had to do something. He tried to lift her gently, expecting her to be heavy. But she wasn't. She was surprisingly light, almost weightless. It startled him for a moment, but he didn't stop. He carried her carefully, feeling her breathing softly against him. The path back to his car felt longer than ever. His mind kept asking questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? Was she human? Was she something else entirely? But no matter how many questions appeared, one thought stayed clear. She needed help now. Answers could come later. When he reached his car, he opened the back door and placed her gently across the seat. He covered her with his jacket, even though she didn't seem cold. He adjusted her head so she could breathe easily. Every few seconds, he checked her breathing. It was still slow, but steady. He sat in the front seat, hands gripping the steering wheel. He took a deep breath. His heart was still racing, but now with a strange mixture of fear and hope. Should he call his workplace? Should he go to the police? Should he inform someone about the strange pod? But deep inside, he knew telling anyone too soon might put her in danger. People might misunderstand her. They might treat her badly or keep her locked away. Armand shook his head. No, he couldn't risk that. He started the engine and drove carefully toward his small house, which was not very far from the mountains. The girl lay silently in the back, her silver eyes still closed, her glowing skin making the car look brighter from inside. Each time Armand glanced in the mirror, he felt something unusual. Not fear, something gentler. A sense of connection that he couldn't explain. The road was quiet. The sky slowly returned to normal. The strange lights faded. The wind calmed down. Everything felt peaceful again, but Armand knew that peace was only on the outside. Inside his life, everything had changed. He had brought home someone mysterious, someone who didn't belong to Earth. When he reached his house, he carried her inside carefully. He placed her on the spare bed in the guest room. The soft light from the lamp made her features even clearer. She looked calm, almost like she was sleeping deeply. Armand touched her forehead gently. She didn't feel like she had a fever, but her breathing still seemed slow. He sat beside her for a long time, watching her breathe, wondering what her story was. She didn't look dangerous. She didn't look like someone who meant harm. Instead, she looked lost. As the night grew quiet, Armand finally whispered to himself, "Who are you? And why did you fall from the sky?" He didn't expect an answer, and he didn't get one. The room stayed still, filled only with soft glowing light from her skin. Armand knew he should rest, but his mind refused to calm down. He kept thinking about the pod, the strange lights, and the mysterious girl lying in his home. But even with all the confusion, he felt something strong in his heart. The decision he made was right. He didn't know her name, her world, or her story. But he knew this. Fate had placed her in his path, and he was not going to leave her alone. That night, Armand's life quietly stepped into a new direction. A direction he didn't choose, but one that chose him. He didn't know it yet, but this simple act of kindness, helping a stranger who fell from the sky, would connect his future to a world far beyond Earth, and this was only the beginning. The next morning, soft sunlight entered Armand's small house, filling each corner with a warm glow. Armand had hardly slept. He kept checking the guest room again and again, making sure the mysterious girl from the sky was still breathing. Every time he saw her chest rise and fall, he felt relief. He didn't understand why he cared so much for someone he didn't even know, but something inside him felt connected to her. Maybe it was the way she looked fragile. Maybe it was because he found her alone in that strange pod. Whatever the reason, he couldn't ignore the feeling. He brought a bowl of warm water and a clean cloth. When he stepped into the room, she was still lying in the same position. Her silver eyes remained closed, her glowing skin giving the room a soft, peaceful shine. He sat beside the bed and gently touched her forehead with the damp cloth, hoping it would help her feel better. She opened her eyes slightly, only for a second. Armand's heart jumped. Her eyes were soft, glowing like moonlight, filled with fear and confusion. But before he could say anything, her eyes closed again. "It's okay," Armand whispered softly, even though he wasn't sure she could understand him. "You're safe here." He spent the next few hours going in and out of the room, trying to figure out how to help her. She wasn't sick in the normal way. Her breathing was slow, her body seemed weak, and her skin kept shifting between bright and dim, as if reacting to something. Armand guessed that Earth's atmosphere might be different for her. making it hard for her body to adjust. His mind raced with ideas. He was an engineer, not a doctor. But maybe he could use his knowledge to make something that would help stabilize her. He went to his small workshop behind the house. The room was filled with tools, wires, old machines, and incomplete projects. Here, Armand felt comfortable. Here, his mind worked clearly. He took a notebook and began sketching ideas. He remembered how the pod had unusual symbols and how she seemed to struggle for air. Maybe she needed a special kind of oxygen mixture. Maybe she needed something to filter the air. Hours passed as Armand built a small device, using whatever parts he had. It wasn't perfect, but it might help. He attached a tube and a small mask that could be placed near her face. The device would slowly clean and cool the air around her. When he finished it, sweat covered his forehead, but he felt hopeful. He carried the device back into the guest room. The girl's breathing seemed even slower now. Armand felt a rush of fear. He quickly placed the mask near her mouth and turned on the device. It hummed softly, releasing clean air toward her. After a few minutes, her breathing became steadier, not strong yet, but better than before. Armand let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Thank goodness. As the hours went by, the girl slowly began to react to her surroundings. Her fingers twitched, her lips parted slightly, and she moved her head a little. When Armand touched her wrist to check her pulse, she didn't pull away this time. It felt like she was beginning to trust him, even if she didn't fully understand what was happening in the afternoon. She opened her eyes again this time, longer than before. Her eyes moved slowly, taking in the room, the light, and finally Armand. She looked confused, scared, and surprised. Armand sat very still, not wanting to frighten her. He smiled gently. "Hi," he said quietly. "You're safe. Don't be scared." She blinked a few times, studying his face. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice came out as a soft whisper, a language Armand had never heard before. The words were smooth, musical, almost like singing. Armand shook his head gently. "I don't understand," he said, "but it's okay. You don't need to talk." She tried again, but her voice was too weak. Armand placed a hand over his chest and said, "Armand." Then he pointed to himself. "Armand." She watched him closely. After a few seconds, she raised her hand slightly and touched her own chest. "Liara," she whispered, her voice breaking. Armand's eyes widened a little. Liara, so that was her name. It sounded beautiful, soft, and fitting for someone so different and graceful. He nodded slowly. "Liara, your name is Liara." She closed her eyes again, but this time it didn't seem like she was fainting. It felt like she was resting. Armand felt a sense of relief. She had spoken. She had given him her name. That meant she was getting better. For the rest of the day, Armand stayed close. He brought her water, though she only drank a few tiny sips. He checked the device he had built, making sure it was running properly. Even though she didn't speak much, her eyes moved more, showing signs of awareness. Every time she looked at Armand, he smiled, hoping it would make her feel safe. However, peace didn't last long. In the evening, Armand noticed something strange outside his window. A small drone floated in the sky, scanning the area with a blinking blue light. It wasn't a toy. It wasn't a delivery drone. It belonged to the government. Armand's heart skipped a beat. They were searching for the object that fell from the sky, the pod he had found. They didn't know about Liara yet, but if they discovered her, things could become complicated very quickly. He turned off the lights and peeked through the curtains. The drone moved slowly, scanning the ground carefully. Armand felt a shiver run down his spine. He needed to hide the pod before anyone else found it. He walked quietly to the guest room and checked on Liara. She was resting peacefully, her breathing steady thanks to the device. Armand looked at her for a long moment. "I'll be back soon," he whispered. "I promise." Then he grabbed a flashlight and hurried out the door, moving quickly toward the mountains. The sky was dark now, and the wind had grown a bit colder. Armand's footsteps crunched on the ground as he approached the clearing where the pod had landed. He looked around to make sure no drones were nearby. Then he covered the pod with fallen branches and leaves. It was not perfect, but it would keep it hidden for now. He planned to return later and try to move it somewhere safer. When he returned home, he felt exhausted, but relieved. The drone had moved on. The area seemed quiet again. He stepped inside the house and went back to the guest room. Liara was awake this time, her eyes open and following him. When she saw him, her expression softened. Armand sat beside her. "I'm here. You're okay?" She raised her hand slowly and pointed at the device near her face. Then she pointed at him, her eyes filled with silent questions. She didn't need to speak for Armand to understand what she meant. "You were having trouble breathing," he explained gently. "So I made this for you. I wanted to help." Liara stared at him, her eyes shining softly. She lifted her hand again, this time to touch the back of his hand. It was a simple, light touch, but it felt full of meaning. Gratitude, trust, maybe even relief. Armand smiled warmly. He didn't know much about her world or her people, but at that moment, he didn't need to. What mattered was that she felt safe with him, and he silently promised himself that he would keep protecting her, no matter what. As night settled again, Liara finally fell into a peaceful sleep, her breathing steady and calm. Armand sat near the bed, watching her with gentle eyes. The world outside might not be safe for her yet, but inside this small house, she had found comfort, and Armand knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than he could ever imagine. Armand woke up the next morning with a strange feeling in his heart. He had slept only a few hours, but his mind was already full of worry. Liara seemed stable now, but the world outside felt unsafe. He remembered the drone he had seen the previous evening. If the government found the pod, they would start asking questions. And if they found Liara, he didn't know what they might do. He had to be careful. He slowly opened the door to the guest room. Liara was sitting up this time, her back resting against the pillows. Her eyes opened gently when she heard him enter. She looked tired, but she also looked calmer than before. The cool air from the device still flowed softly around her, helping her breathe. "Good morning, Armand," said softly. Liara blinked slowly, as if trying to understand the words. She placed her hand on her chest again, trying to speak, but her voice came out weak. She said something in her soft, musical language. But Armand couldn't understand. He sat beside her and gently shook his head. "I want to understand you, but I can't yet." Liara studied him carefully, as if reading emotions more than words. She pointed at the window, then at the device, then at herself. She seemed to be asking if she could go outside or if she had to stay here. Armand hesitated. He didn't want her to step out into the open where someone could see her, but she seemed to need fresh air. So he shook his head gently at first, then thought for a moment. He opened the window slightly to let in a bit of natural air. Liara closed her eyes and breathed slowly. Her expression softened, showing she liked it. After a few minutes, Armand brought her a glass of water. She took it carefully with both hands, as if she had never held a human cup before. She drank very slowly, her eyes observing the glass with deep curiosity. Even small things amazed her. Armand watched her with gentle amusement. But something changed when Liara suddenly looked toward the window again. Her eyes widened. Her back straightened slightly. Her glowing skin dimmed for a moment, then brightened again. She whispered something in her language, sounding worried. "What happened?" Armand asked, following her gaze. He looked out the window and felt his stomach drop. A strange pattern was moving across the sky, tiny sparks of blue light, almost like fireflies, but organized in a shape. They moved silently, gliding through the air as if searching for something. Liara stared at them with fear in her eyes. She pointed at the sky, then at herself, then pressed her hand against her chest. Armand realized she was trying to say something important. "You know those lights, don't you?" he asked. She nodded slowly. Then she traced a shape in the air, the shape of a long, curved object. Armand guessed she was trying to explain a type of ship or machine. He remembered the pod she had arrived in. Maybe these blue sparks were connected to her world. Liara then raised her hands and crossed them in front of her, shaking her head. Armand understood this sign easily. They are not your people. Liara shook her head firmly. Her expression softened into worry, almost like she was remembering something painful. She placed her hand near her throat and made a soft sound that expressed fear. Armand realized these things in the sky were not friendly to her. They were looking for her. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He closed the curtains quickly and turned off the light. "It's okay. They won't find you here," he said softly, even though he wasn't fully sure. But Liara seemed to trust his calm voice. She leaned back against the pillows and tried to breathe steadily. Armand knew he had to check the situation outside. He couldn't leave Liara alone for long, but he needed to know what those lights were doing. He placed a gentle hand on her arm. "I'll go and look. I'll be back soon." Liara grabbed his wrist lightly. Her touch was warm and soft, filled with silent worry. Armand gave her a reassuring smile. "It's okay. I promise I'll be careful." Outside, the air felt heavy. The sky was cloudy, but the blue lights were still visible, moving slowly like floating insects. Armand stepped behind a tree and watched carefully. The lights were not random, they were scanning the area. They moved lower, sweeping across the ground. Armand recognized the pattern. They were searching for something specific. His heart began to race. He thought of the pod he had tried to hide in the mountains. If these scanning lights reached that area, they might easily find it. And if they found the pod, they would know Liara was nearby. Armand returned to the house quickly, his steps fast but quiet. When he entered the guest room, Liara looked at him with worried eyes. "They're searching," Armand said softly. "I think they're looking for your pod." Liara's eyes dimmed with fear. She placed both her hands on her head, her fingers trembling slightly. She whispered something that sounded like a soft plea. Armand's heart tightened. He didn't need to understand her language to know she was scared. He sat beside her again. "We need to move the pod somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find it." Liara nodded slowly, but then pointed at herself and shook her head. She didn't have enough strength to move, and she knew it. "You don't have to come," Armand said gently. "I'll do it." Liara reached out and touched his hand again, her eyes filled with worry. She pressed his hand to her chest for a moment, then to his own chest, as if trying to tell him that she didn't want him to go because she feared he would get hurt. Armand gave her a calm smile. "Don't worry. I'll be careful. I won't let anything happen." He stood up and grabbed his bag, filling it with tools and cloth to cover the pod more securely. Before leaving, he looked at Liara one more time. Her silver eyes were glowing softly, filled with trust and fear mixed together. It made Armand feel strangely responsible when he reached the mountains. The sky had dimmed even more. The blue scanning lights were now closer, floating low like tiny lanterns. Armand crouched behind a rock and waited for them to pass. His breath was steady, but his heart was beating fast. After a few minutes, the lights drifted in another direction. Armand hurried to the hidden pod. He brushed off the leaves and branches and covered it again with thicker cloth. Then he pulled it toward a narrow cave nearby. The pod was heavier than he expected, but he pushed and pulled with all his strength. Finally, he managed to hide it deep inside the cave. He stepped out and looked at the sky again. The searching lights were moving away, but he knew they might return. He had to get back to Liara quickly. When he returned to the house, Liara immediately looked up at him. Her eyes searched his face, checking if he was okay. When she saw he was unharmed, she breathed out softly in relief. That simple reaction warmed Armand's heart. He sat beside her again. "The pod is safe now," he said. "They won't find it." Liara reached out and lightly touched his hand again. Her touch felt grateful, gentle, and full of trust. Armand felt something shift inside him. He didn't know why he cared so much for someone he had met only days ago, but he did. The night grew quiet. The sky finally cleared. The blue lights slowly disappeared, drifting into the distance like fading stars. Armand stayed beside Liara until she fell asleep again. Her breathing soft and peaceful. He watched her for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The world was changing around him, and so was his life. And even though he didn't fully understand what danger Liara was running from, he knew one thing for certain. He would protect her, no matter what came next. The next morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself was trying not to disturb anything fragile. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, touching the floor gently. Armand woke up earlier than usual, his mind still filled with worry from the previous day. The strange blue lights that had searched the sky had left a deep tension inside him. He didn't know when they would return or how far their search would go. But the one thing he knew for certain was that he had to protect Liara. He stepped softly toward the guest room. When he opened the door, he saw Liara sitting up again, looking a little stronger than before. She had her hands resting on the blanket, her silver eyes calm but thoughtful. When she saw Armand, she gave a small, warm look that almost felt like a smile, even though her lips didn't move much. Her face seemed gentler now, less afraid. "Good morning," Armand said quietly. Liara nodded slowly, her glowing skin brightening just a little. She pointed toward the window again and made a soft humming sound as if asking if the sky was clear. Armand peered through the curtains. The sky looked peaceful again. No strange lights. No drones. Just soft clouds and warm sunlight. "It's clear," he said. "Nothing unusual." Liara relaxed a little. She placed her hand on her chest, took a soft breath, and let it out slowly. Her glowing skin flickered gently, almost like relief passing through her. Armand brought her a bowl of warm soup, something light and easy, and offered her a spoon. Liara observed the bowl with careful curiosity, as if she had never seen food like this before. She picked up the spoon slowly and tried to copy how Armand demonstrated. It took her a moment to understand, but she managed to eat a little. Her expression changed slightly, almost as if she was surprised by the flavor. Armand couldn't help but chuckle softly. "You're doing great," he said kindly. Liara tilted her head, studying his expression, and then a small, shy smile appeared on her lips. It was brief, but it warmed Armand's heart more than he expected, even though things felt calm inside the house. Armand sensed that something bigger was coming. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the way Liara kept glancing at the sky, or the way she flinched whenever she heard a faint, distant sound. Something still worried her. In the early afternoon, Liara suddenly looked up with alert eyes. She placed her hand near her ear, as if listening to something Armand couldn't hear. She whispered a soft word in her language, her voice mixed with confusion and worry. "What is it?" Armand asked gently, sitting beside her. Liara slowly lifted her hands and made a circular shape in the air, then brought her palms closer together and separated them again. Armand didn't understand at first, but she repeated the motion patiently. Her eyes remained serious. "Something is coming," Armand guessed. Liara nodded. Armand's heart tightened. Maybe the searching lights had returned. He quickly checked the window again. The sky was still empty. Liara then pressed her hand lightly on Armand's arm, her touch gentle and warm. She looked deeply into his eyes, as if trying to prepare him for something. Armand felt a wave of confusion. What did she know? What was approaching? Minutes turned into an hour. Everything remained quiet. But Liara didn't look fully relaxed. Her glowing skin dimmed and brightened again at irregular moments, as if reacting to signals through the air. Then, in the early evening, the air changed. A soft hum filled the sky, not loud, but deep, like a gentle vibration passing through the wind. Armand froze. He looked outside again, and this time he saw something. A large shadow moved across the clouds, shaped like a long floating vessel. Its surface shimmered with soft silver light. It wasn't glowing with harsh colors. It wasn't scanning the land. It moved slowly and peacefully, as if gliding through the air with calm purpose. Liara gasped softly, her eyes widening. Her glowing skin brightened intensely, filling the room with gentle light. She whispered something that sounded like a name or a plea. Armand turned to her quickly. "You know that ship?" Liara nodded, her eyes filling with emotion. She placed her hands over her heart and closed her eyes briefly. Then she opened them again, shining with hope this time, not fear. Armand felt a mix of relief and nervousness. If this ship belonged to her people, then maybe she was finally safe. But he didn't know what her people would think about a human helping her. Would they misunderstand him? Would they take her away suddenly? He didn't have time to think much more. Within minutes, the large vessel descended a huge, beautiful ship shaped like a silver crescent, landing silently in the open field near his house. A soft breeze blew across the ground as it settled. Armand and Liara both looked toward the sound coming from outside. Lyra's hands trembled slightly, not in fear but in anticipation. Her eyes were shining like stars. Armand stood up nervously. "Are they your family?" Liara nodded slowly. Armand swallowed hard. He wasn't sure how they would react to seeing her in a human's home, but he knew he had to stay by her side, at least until she felt safe. They heard a soft, melodic sound from outside, almost like a gentle call. Liara took a deep breath and tried to stand. Armand quickly supported her, gently placing her arm around his shoulder. Together, they walked out of the house. The moment they stepped into the open air, everything felt different. A tall figure, graceful and radiant, stood near the ship. She had the same glowing skin as Liara, but brighter, like light reflecting off polished silver. Her robe moved gently with the wind. Her eyes were calm yet powerful. Liara whispered a word in her language, one that sounded warm and emotional. Armand guessed it meant mother. The tall woman stepped forward with a gentle expression. When Liara let go of Armand and moved toward her, the woman wrapped her arms around her carefully. It was a quiet, emotional moment. Liara leaned into her mother, her glowing skin shining softly with relief. Armand stepped back a little, not wanting to interrupt. His chest felt warm seeing Liara safe, but he also felt something heavier, feeling that she might leave now, and he would return to an empty home, then slowly. The tall woman turned her head toward Armand. Her eyes steadied him deeply, as if seeing not his body but his heart. Armand felt nervous but stood still. She walked toward him gracefully, her presence warm, not frightening. When she stopped in front of him, she placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Liara watched with hopeful, emotional eyes. The tall woman spoke in her own language, soft words shaped like melody, and the ship behind her echoed them with gentle light. Armand didn't understand a single word, but her tone sounded warm. Grateful, Liara stepped beside her mother and touched her arm, then pointed at Armand. She began to speak softly, telling her mother something long, something emotional. Armand watched them, confused but curious. After listening carefully, the tall woman turned back to Armand. Her expression softened into something that looked like deep honor. She raised her hand gently and placed it over her heart. Then she spoke a sentence in clear, translated English, a voice softened by technology but full of emotion. "For your courage and your kindness. You will marry my daughter." Armand froze, completely stunned. He blinked several times, not sure he heard correctly. Marry her? Her daughter. He looked at Liara, whose face flushed with soft, glowing color. She looked down shyly, her hands folding together, but she didn't look upset. In fact, she looked peaceful. Armand's heart raced, but not out of fear. He felt overwhelmed, surprised, confused, but also touched. He had only wanted to help Liara because it was the right thing to do. He never expected such a declaration. The tall woman, Liara's mother. The alien queen smiled warmly, her eyes filled with respect and gratitude. It was clear this was not a joke or force. It was an honor in her culture, a way of thanking someone who had protected a royal family member with pure intentions. Armand stood there, breathless, unsure how to respond as his world quietly shifted again, and Liara stood beside him, her silver eyes glowing softly, waiting for his heart to decide what came next. Armand slowly opened his eyes and found himself lying on a soft bed that felt different from anything he had ever known. The air around him was fresh, cool, and filled with a faint, sweet fragrance. For a few seconds, he couldn't remember where he was or what had happened. All he knew was that he wasn't on Earth anymore. The room was glowing softly, not from bulbs or lamps, but from the walls themselves, as if they were alive with gentle light. Then everything came back to him, the chase in the mountains, The strange attackers, Lyara, crying out his name, and finally the enormous royal spacecraft arriving from the sky. He remembered collapsing after protecting Lyara, and now he was here, safe, though he didn't know for how long or what would happen next. Armand tried to sit up, but before he could, the door opened with a smooth sound and Lyara stepped inside. She looked healthier now. Her silver eyes were bright again, her breathing calm, and the strange glowing marks on her skin were steady. She smiled softly when she saw him awake, and the worry on her face faded. "You're awake?" she said in her gentle voice. Armand tried to smile back. "Yeah, I guess I am." "Where are we?" "We are on my mother's ship," Lyara replied. "You are safe here. The healers have been taking care of you. You were asleep for a long time." Armand blinked. "How long?" 2 days, she said softly. "Your body needed rest. You used all your strength on Earth." He didn't know what to say. He remembered the moment he had stepped in front of her, protecting her without even thinking. Now, seeing her standing there with a calm expression, he felt relieved that she was safe. Lyara walked to the side of his bed and sat on a floating chair beside him. "You've saved my life," she said quietly. "You helped me when you didn't even know who I was. And you kept helping me even when things got dangerous." Armand looked away shyly. "Anyone would have done that." Lyara shook her head. "No, not everyone would risk everything for someone they don't understand. You did." There was a small pause. Armand felt his heart beat a little faster. Not from fear, but from the strange feeling that Lyra's words brought. Just then, the door opened again, and 2 royal guards stood respectfully outside. Behind them, the alien queen entered the room. Her presence filled the space instantly. She was tall, graceful, and covered in shimmering robes that flowed like liquid light. The glowing patterns on her skin were brighter and more complex than Lyora's, and her eyes held a wisdom that Armand could barely comprehend. Armand quickly tried to sit up straight, but the queen raised a hand gently. "Do not strain yourself, human," she said, in a deep, calm voice. "You are still healing." Armand lowered his head slightly, unsure how to behave in front of a queen from another world. The queen studied him carefully. "You have courage," she said, "and you have kindness. These qualities are rare, even among my own people." Armand didn't know if he should reply. He simply nodded. Lyra stood from her chair, her expression hopeful but nervous. The queen looked at her daughter, then at Armand again. "You protected my child when she was far from home," she continued. "You risked yourself for her when danger surrounded you. You stood between her and harm, even when you knew nothing about her world." Armand felt his hands tighten around the blanket. He didn't know where this conversation was going, but he sensed it was important. "My people follow ancient traditions," the queen said slowly. "When someone saves a royal member's life, our laws bind their destinies together. It is not a small matter. It is a bond of honor, trust, and respect." Armand's heart skipped a beat. He remembered her words earlier when she had first appeared on Earth. She had said he would marry her daughter. At the time, he thought it was just a dramatic statement or a misunderstanding. But now, the queen seemed serious, calm, thoughtful, and determined. She looked directly into his eyes and said, "You will join our family. You will stand beside my daughter. You will share her path." Armand's breath caught. Lyra looked at him, her face turning slightly red, though her species didn't blush the way humans did. She seemed both hopeful and nervous. Armand opened his mouth slowly. "Your Majesty, I don't know anything about your world. I don't know your customs, your people, your life. I don't even know what it means to be part of your family." The queen nodded with understanding. "That is true. But you have already shown a heart that will learn, grow, and protect. That is all we value." Armand swallowed hard. "And Lyra, what does she think?" Lyra looked at him, her silver eyes warm and soft. "I trust you," she said gently. "I feel safe when you are near. You treated me with kindness even before you knew who I was. I do not feel forced. I feel grateful." Her words touched him more deeply than he expected. Somehow, despite everything Earth danger, fear he felt a strange connection to her. She wasn't just an alien now. She was someone who had trusted him completely. The Queen continued, "You will not be trapped or forced. If you choose to join us, you will have a new life, one full of peace, respect, and purpose. If you choose not to, we will still honor you and return you safely to your world." Armand had never expected such kindness. He took a deep breath, thinking carefully. He imagined going back to Earth, knowing that he had touched a world he could never speak about. Life would go back to normal, but he would always feel like something extraordinary had slipped away. And then he imagined traveling through the stars, exploring new worlds, living among beings who valued courage and kindness, and beside him would be Liara. He looked at her again, and she gave him a gentle smile, the kind that made him feel calm, even in a strange new place. Armand didn't know everything about their world, but he knew enough to trust her. "Your Majesty," he said slowly, "I don't know what the future will be like, but I am willing to try. I will stay with Liara." Liara's eyes brightened with surprise and happiness. The Queen gave a proud nod, her expression warm. "Then it is decided," she declared. "Your path begins now." Soon after, Armand was guided through the ship. Learning about its technology and meeting the peaceful inhabitants who served the royal family, every room glowed softly, every corner hummed with quiet energy, and every person treated him with gentle respect. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like just another ordinary human. He felt seen, valued. Liara stayed close to him, explaining their customs, showing him how to communicate with the ship, and teaching him about her people's gentle ways. Sometimes she laughed softly when he tried to learn their language, and he couldn't help but laugh back. As the ship began its journey toward Liara's home planet, Armand stood by a large window, watching stars drift past like glowing dust. It felt unreal, like a dream he couldn't have imagined even in his wildest thoughts. Liara stepped beside him. "Are you scared?" she asked softly. Armand shook his head. "No, I think I'm excited," she smiled. "Good, because this is only the beginning." He looked at her, and for the first time, he saw not just an alien princess, but someone whose life had become tied to his in the most unexpected way, and deep in his heart, he felt something new, something warm, hopeful, and steady, as the stars stretched before them. Armand took a quiet breath and whispered, "Whatever comes next, I'm ready." And with Liara beside him, he truly felt he was.